2017 was when I first sort of did the Veganuary challenge. But up until that point, I was pescatarian, then vegetarian. So pescatarian since I was about 16, 17. And then sort of went veggie. And sort of I was working at Ecotricity, which is the world's first vegan energy company, the world's first green energy company also. And so I was kind of just immersed within this sort of environment of ethical living and, how to have, how to help the planet as much as you can, like in your daily life, as well as like in the bigger picture. So I think what happened was just learning in my day-to-day life about all sorts of things to do with the environment and, how climate change is impacting the planet, and sort of being vegan was a part of that. So yeah, I tried throughout 2016, which was also the year that Dan and I got married, and our wedding was completely vegan, even though we weren't vegan at the time. We sort of knew we were going down that route, so we just thought, there's a fair few vegans coming. We want to be vegan, so we're gonna like make this event what we want. So yeah, like and then in 2017 we kind of got to the point where it was just right, I'm gonna do this Veganuary, and then I just never really looked back.
Going back to the pescatarianism, if that's the official term, and the sort of vegetarian journey and so on and so forth, were they all kind of rooted in a kind of wanting to do better for animals? Was that kind of like that kind of initial catalyst for that, and then did it kind of grow from there, or was there another reason for those things?
I think initially I just found sort of like throughout being a teenager, like meat, kind of like eating meat being I didn't really like it, and I found it uncomfortable as a food, I suppose. I didn't really think much more about it than that, other than knowing I didn't want to eat it. And then sort of like going into sort of like only having fish rather than any meat. And then it just all kind of like went from there. And the more that I dug into it, it became more about an issue about the animals. And then sort of I learned all about how like actually this is really wrong. And like I didn't know that. No one taught me that before, which I think, is probably something a lot of people can relate to. And then just on that educational journey, then learning about how, the agriculture is so bad for the planet and, emissions and all of that sort of stuff. So it was a real journey over a long number of years for me.
Yeah. And so, you and Dan, you sound like you said, you were kind of made up your mind you were going to go that way before the wedding and so on and so forth. How long after the wedding was that kind of like the final point, or was there kind of more to the journey?
No, there was more to it. So I think during that year, 2016, I was trying to go vegan, but my one biggest weakness was chocolate. So I was just like, I was vegan apart from chocolate. Sort of like I would be like, oh, I've had a vegan month. Oh no, it was chocolate. Damn it. So, that was the one thing that was holding me back for a while. For Dan, it was cheese. And then we took the Veganuary challenge, and then we sort of like we did our honeymoon in a few months later. So it would have been like we did like a 6-week backpacking trip around Asia, and then we were like, this is it. Like we'd already kind of done Veganuary and we were living the vegan lifestyle, but the real challenge was to then be on that trip and to seeing how we fared, because it wasn't like it is now, even in 2017, which is like, a fair few number of years ago now, and it's changed so much. So yeah, there were some slip-ups, like you might have had something that accidentally had like milk powder on when you're at 7-Eleven or something like that. Eating out in Asia was kind of like fine, because there was a lot of like veggie and vegan places where you can just get vegan meals, no problem. But I think that was what solidified it for us, because we were like, if we could do that, like, it's not going to be a challenge elsewhere.
Yeah. Was it people around you? It sounded like you were kind of like with the Ecotricity thing and the kind of the wedding and the some of the guests being vegan and so on, that there was kind of a little group sort of you'd fallen in with or had formed around you, or you'd all kind of had the same epiphanies at the sort of similar moments. Was that the case? Was there a bit of a group around you?
Yeah, a bit. I mean, I like in my job, like I was in like the marketing department at Ecotricity, and so Dan's cousin is a graphic designer that was working on that team, also a vegan, and so yeah, some of Dan's family were already vegan, and so exposed for want of a better word. Like we kind of understood it, and like if some Dan's family were coming over or we were eating out, it was always a consideration. And because I was pescatarian then vegetarian, like it was always the food options were always a consideration. And so yeah, I think that by sort of like being in that office and having people around that were always having the discussion around like what's better for the environment, why is this like ethically bad, and like why is this immoral, there was a lot of conversation, and it really did have an impact on me. And then since then, so Dan's sister was also on a very similar journey, so she's now gone vegan, and also his parents, so it makes family get-togethers very, very easy.
Yeah, and pretty unique. Like thinking about like being around a working environment like you were at Ecotricity, and like you say, there was these conversations coming up and people thinking about doing the least harm and these kind of things, which is fantastic, and for many people is probably a bit of a dream world. Did that jar a little bit when you then went into kind of non-vegan spaces? Did you get yourself into a bit of a sort of almost a eco-conscious or vegan bubble, like when you were working with that group, and then you had sort of friends and like your family going vegan and so on? Was it kind of difficult, like a bit of a jarring moment, like I say, when you kind of went up into non-vegan spaces?
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely relate to that. Especially a bit more recently as well, actually, because I think because I've had that experience, I've got a fair few friends who are also vegan. Like I say, I've got family that are vegan, and I was on a hen do, and then I was at dinner, and I was sort of like the only vegan. And I was like, I'm not used to this. Like, what is happening? Like, we're not going to a vegan restaurant? What do you mean? I didn't say that, obviously, but it was, it was something that I realised then. I'm actually in a very lucky and sort of like probably unique, as you say, and sort of like privileged position in that sort of area, because I'm so like, it's such a consideration already because everybody's already on the same wavelength, that we're picking the vegan place, or we're picking the place that's got like the best vegan options wherever we're going, because it's just, we don't really have to think about non-vegan options.
How did you find yourself engaging when you were in those kind of non-vegan groups then? Because I think, for many vegans who perhaps don't have many people around them who are vegan, sometimes not even their own partner or their own family members, people they live with, etc., they kind of have to very quickly learn to navigate those conversations. And often, I'm probably talking from my own experience here, that they can do that kind of quite in a quite clumsy way, those kind of when they're navigating those conversations, and slowly they get kind of better at it, and so on and so forth. What was your experience of that?
I think I'm really conscious of how I want to come across as a vegan. I don't want to be that stereotype, and I think because of the work that I do on the blog, like it's more about not putting veganism front and center and putting it. I don't think it helps to go to your friends who like are eating meat around the dinner table being like, that's so wrong, like don't eat meat, it's just not my approach. I'm very I'm not like, I can't think of a better way of saying it, but other than being like a pushy vegan, like I'm not really like that. I think everyone's on their journey, and saying to someone like, being really jarring and kind of like pushing that in front of them when they're not ready for it, like you're not gonna have an enjoyable conversation, and it's not really gonna make an impact. So I think I just try to be like encouraging, and I actually found that I got a lot of questions. Like, I was only vegan around the table, but there's a lot of questions like, what can you have? We're at an Italian restaurant, like, as long as it's a pasta sauce and there's veggies in it, or as long as it's not a creamy thing, you can kind of eat at any Italian restaurant, because as long as they're not using fresh pasta, it's quite easy for the chef to make a spicy arrabbiata or whatever it is that's a tomato-based sauce. But I did get quite a lot of questions like, oh, so you can eat pasta? Yeah, I can eat pasta. How do you make pasta though that's vegan? I was like, it's just flour and water sort of thing. So it's like, it's really sort of like this re-education, not even re-education, but like people realizing it's actually not that hard to go and eat at a normal restaurant, even though it feels like something that's probably really alien to someone who's not on a vegan diet, to be like, that just seems like a headache. But actually I was there around the table, and it wasn't an issue at all.
I was talking about this with someone recently, actually, and they'd been vegan the same sort of time as me, and I think the challenge, and it was 2017, funny enough. So it was sort of very
cool.
similar times. And it's really interesting because you forget, I think, especially like, you know, for you and I, who've sort of really kind of immersed ourselves in sort of veganism to the point where we probably don't speak to as many non-vegans as
Yeah, right.
as we probably should. I don't know. Well, I'm speaking for myself here. You probably do, but you know, I've sort of immersed myself in that, you know, with my work and so on and so forth. That you sometimes forget that people have those like quite basic questions, like and that you were probably in that space too at one point, you know, in terms of like, well, is pasta vegan? Like, I don't know, like let's find this stuff out. It all seems really like obvious to us now, like what is and what isn't. I had a friend, a non-vegan friend, for example, who said, he gave me you know those Hello Fresh boxes, right? So he dropped me a message and said, we're going away, but we've got one meal left, like would you guys like it, because they live around the corner. And he said, I think it's all vegan apart from the peanut butter. And
Oh no.
yeah, and I was kind of like, well, oh, it's okay, like peanut butter's vegan, like but it took me right back, made me think, okay, so these questions, you know, this is where I was, and I've almost forgotten that most people think this kind of lends itself to the idea that actually veganism is really difficult, because I think most people think, who are non-vegan, that pretty much everything's got animal products in it apart from, you know, grass and salad. You know, that's the sort of stereotype, you know. Like, was that your experience when you went into it, or because it was a fairly kind of you know, like I said, you were immersed with other vegans and you were kind of on this journey with ecotricity and so on and so forth, did it kind of sort of sneak up upon you, that knowledge, or do you remember those feelings?
I don't know. That's a really good question, actually. I don't know. I think there was an element of like common sense to it. Like, and I think maybe because before I thought, oh, maybe I could try going vegan, I already was exposed to like those people who were already thinking like that. So it quickly became like you quickly got that knowledge of, yeah, pasta's vegan. Like, you don't really need to check that. Like that sort of thing. I think, yeah, very difficult to answer the question, because I think I was so sort of in that space already. I just kind of like learnt those things via osmosis and didn't really realise I was learning them.
Yeah. As that kind of, you know, that knowledge that at least, you know, not everybody's in that space, has that kind of informed what you do with Vegan Punks, you know, moving forward to what that is now? And, you know, we'll talk about what it is for folks who don't know, but has it informed a little bit of why you want to do it, to kind of educate in that space?
Definitely, because I think that there are people generally are not brought up, or like you don't do like nutrition really at school to the level that you kind of like need to like live a, I don't know, healthy lifestyle, or, you know, at least have some sort of knowledge around that. I think if we were taught these things at school, you'd know what had dairy in it, like you'd know about these things. So I think it's really important as a food blogger, and especially as a vegan food blogger, to not think that everybody knows the same thing that you know, because like you know, I always get things like, oh, like, I don't, just really something that you think is a basic question, or sorry, that somebody else is like thinking, oh, it's a basic question, I might be silly to ask that, but to you it's like standard knowledge, but to them it's like, you know, I've never thought about this before, and actually you can answer that really quite easily, but like for someone else who hasn't had the same experience, it's, you know, it's a minefield. They've got no idea about those sorts of things.
So on this note, I suppose, like, tell us a little bit about the inception of Vegan Punks. Like, for folks who don't know, what is it? Where did it come from? What was the inspiration?
Well, thanks. So yeah, it's a vegan food blog that has been going since 2017. First started on Instagram, like literally when we were at the airport about to go on a honeymoon. We were like, right, we're doing this, we're starting this Instagram, because like we just you know, there were there were obviously vegan Instagram accounts around, but like it wasn't anything like it is today, and we just wanted to like just show how, you know, accessible and tasty and easy to make vegan food was, because we'd been on that journey, and so like we were like, oh, we've got all of this like knowledge at our fingertips, it's so easy, like, so we just wanted to be sort of like do our bit for the movement. And I think I see it not only as like, you know, how I earn my money now, but like it's a bit of activism as well. Like it's not sort of like that street activism, there's the, you know, that sort of thing. Like I don't feel like I'm very good at it, but I can help people go vegan through food. And not even by saying, this is a vegan meal, just like, this is such a delicious recipe, I think you'll like it. But yeah, anyway, it came from, so yeah, we were going vegan and we're really heavy into like the punk scene, and like, not punk like the Clash, like that. It's more like modern, more modern, like post-punk, ska punk, like melodic stuff. So that sort of thing, like just to get the right idea of what sort of scene that is, a really sort of like welcoming scene. And there's actually a huge crossover between people in the punk scene and people that are vegan. So like every event that we would go to, so we were at Manchester Punk Festival just the other week, and the only food that they put on was a vegan caterer at one of the bigger venues. And another one the other week, same situation. So yeah, so that's where sort of like the name comes from, and the inspiration is just like, we want to bring simple vegan recipes to people, just to really prove how tasty it is, delicious and tasty it is, accessible, and how easy it is to make. So, because I think we've really seen that people say, oh, but it's so hard. But if you can show it's not that hard, you know, it's just ingredients that you might already have in the cupboard. It's ingredients that are really easy to buy now. Well, not now, but you know, it was easier now than it used to be. But yeah, that's where it's come from, and it all just sort of grew from there. Sort of being very organic and just kind of like posting recipes and sort of like what we were making at home, to then like learning about food photography and creating the website, and learning about SEO. And you know, we've been on this journey over a good few years, so now we know how to run our food blog as professional food bloggers. We know how to make videos, not the best videos ever, but like I know how to do that now. And yeah, the food photography, so I've got a background in photography, like that's what I did at college. So I kind of like had some knowledge, but learning how to present food to make it look like someone wants to take a bite through the screen, that's not easy. You have to really work at that skill.
I'm fascinated, like the point at which you started 2017, just as you were about to go on the honeymoon, just as you were kind of almost making the commitment to like, this is the route we're going down, that you started it back then. Because I would have almost expected it to have started later, like you know, this is our kind of form of activism. This is how we're going to simplify veganism for people and so on. And I imagine, you know, it sounds like that's where it's gone to. That's what it's become. Back in 2017, was that your initial intention, or was there an element of like, this also actually holds us to account, you know, as kind of new vegans?
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. Like, because you know, the first people that start following you are all your friends and family. So it's like, you know, you've got to stay accountable to them in the first instance, and then as it grows, you know, you're just sort of like, it just helps you really solidify in your decisions that you're putting something out there that's so like, that can be easily seen. So yeah, I would say so. Definitely, there must have been a level of accountability, even though we weren't necessarily like aware of it at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel much the same. You know, like it's when I started the podcast, it was a couple of years afterwards, but I think there is definitely an element of, yeah, it's my form of activism, and it's also held me to account in many ways. Like, you know, in terms of I'm trying to immerse myself in the culture and understanding more about it, and never stop kind of learning about it, and always seeing veganism as, I think one of my guests once said, you know, veganism isn't a thing you are, it's like it's a practice. It's something you do all the time, and you choose to do all the time, and you can choose not to do, and so you need to practice, and you need to keep thinking, keep learning. And so yeah, it's very much like been that, although that was never my intention, but it has kind of done that for me. So I was just kind of curious as to starting that so early. Were you always, you and Dan, were you always kind of into cooking and so on?
Yeah, we're massively into cooking, and we're really into trying recipes from different countries, and because we love to travel, so we're always just really excited to learn like a different recipe from a different country. And like when we were going to like on our travels, we were like always taking in like a cooking class, so it was just a very organic sort of passion for us both. That also is like a fun activity to do together as well.
Yeah. Have you been are you typically recipe followers, recipe creators, like how does the kind of journey sort of start with it? Is it kind of like, what can we do today? Let's be completely creative, blank piece of paper. Or is there kind of we had that thing back then, do we reverse it? How can we reverse engineer it? Or are you more like working from recipes?
No, it's more sort of like have an idea, do some research, like, because we like to understand how something is traditionally made, but then so that it's like not completely butchered for like when it comes to publishing it online. Because I mean, there's, I just don't want to do that. You have to find that sort of like sacred middle ground between what's easy and what ingredients you can find at the shop and what's sort of like more traditional, so someone's getting a bit more of an authentic experience. So, and then just finding that middle ground. So it's a lot of like trial and error. And yeah, like at first when we were first trying to develop our recipes, it still was a lot of trial and error, but it was a lot of like, oh, how can we make this vegan? So because there wasn't like, back in 2017, there wasn't really as much like, a vegan mac and cheese was a completely different recipe, like to what you're going to find online now. So there was a lot of like, how can we make this thing that previously wasn't vegan, but vegan now?
How have you mentioned obviously things have changed even in that period of time. Sometimes I speak to folks who have been vegan for 40, 50 years, and I always think, right, like, 2017, I talk about like it was ages ago, but things definitely have changed in that period of time, even though it feels short by comparison to the 40, 50-year vegans. But thinking about 2017, starting out with Vegan Punks, doing what you were doing, how have things changed in the kind of vegan food space?
I'd say it's a lot, like, from a business perspective, it's a lot more saturated now. There's a lot more competition, and from a sort of like a blogging perspective, like the vegan food blogging space is the most competitive space, and that's just kind of accepted within the food blog sort of world, with food bloggers. So that's something that we've been up against, and something that you have to just kind of like think of like new strategies to how you can like get your recipes in front of the people that want to make them. But also I would say when we were first starting, like, it's hard to remember exactly, but I felt like the only way to get like the best options, like if you wanted vegan cheese for a recipe, for instance, you had to shop from Ocado. They're the only ones that had it. Like, no, you could rely on them having it. And they were the ones that had like the best, like if you needed like vegan, like chicken chunks or whatever, like we don't actually do a lot of recipes with like the meat substitutes, but if you wanted it for a treat or you've got people coming over or whatever. But I think that the sourcing of products is, and the sort of like the amount of products that are available for your recipes now is just exploded. Like, I don't know, I can't even put a figure on how much it's exploded, like 100,000 times or something. Like, it's just like gone into the stratosphere sort of thing. Like, it's huge. And yeah, so I just think that there's a lot more discussion around like vegan food and vegan recipes. There's a lot more people that are wanting to be making them online because there's just been such a boom in the space generally.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that particularly vegan food bloggers, that's more saturated than other types of food blogging. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know for certain, but my gut feeling is that if you're a vegan, you're really passionate about that lifestyle and the way you cook. And so I wonder if there are people, of all the people that are going to make food blogging, whether it's a hobby or as a business, if you're really, really passionate about vegan food and cooking vegan food, it kind of seems like a no-brainer that you might want to try and put that online for other people to see. And I think maybe like as a percentage of people that are really into food and cooking, vegans are more likely to try and take it and run with it to try and like help more people try vegan recipes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. My brain's firing loads of different. Yeah, because I suppose there's also an element of, people start into the world of plant-based eating and they start into kind of veganism, and maybe they, as they're experimenting, they're kind of proud of themselves. So they start taking some pictures, and then it escalates to videos and then food blogs and Instagram accounts, and before you know it, they're in a different world. I can imagine there's loads of different reasons. Do do you find in your kind of, in your interactions with the folks who are kind of watching the videos and following you online, do you find a lot of non-vegans in that space too?
Loads. I would say maybe more. And I've also equally got people that have maybe started like and found our recipes and they weren't vegan, and then they'll go, because of your recipes, I've gone on this whole vegan journey and now I'm vegan. And I'm just like, yes, that is the best outcome.
That's really fascinating as well. Like that you'd probably say it's more non-vegans. Like this may seem like an obvious one, but I suppose how important then do you see kind of food in the kind of like activism space? Because obviously, like I think people sometimes would lump food blogging and so on in the kind of like lifestyle veganism, and it can get criticised sometimes within the vegan community almost. From some folks who are like, we're only focused on food, we're not talking enough about the other things and so on and so forth. But actually, when you put it like that, it feels like far more of an important kind of Trojan horse, if you like, than perhaps sometimes those folks who would criticise that may give it credit for. Like, what's your kind of view on it as an activism tool?
Yeah, I think it's a really good one. But I do think for sort of like balance, there are going to be like touch points for all sorts of different people, and say like the food argument or the food area isn't going to work for them, but the environment area is. But then equally it might be the other way around for other people. So I think that a huge barrier to people is thinking, oh, I don't know what I'd eat and it's going to be disgusting anyway, and like you can't have good recipe, you can't eat good food if it's vegan. And actually, if people can try good food that is vegan, they'll be like, oh, this is nice. And so you can actually change people's viewpoints on that just by taste. So I think that's where I'm going, and I think everybody's got that one thing that's that sort of like something that's difficult for them in their lives, and it really affects them what you eat every single day. Like if you're going to try and have a vegan meal and you want it to taste good, especially if you like food. So I think going down that route for people that like food, I think is a really good way of showing that vegan meals and therefore being vegan isn't actually giving up anything.
Yeah. Have you seen particular types of meal change or evolve in terms of their popularity over the course of the time you've been doing it? And what I mean by this is, obviously, we talked about, you mentioned the kind of rise of meat substitutes and so on and so forth. Obviously, like as we see sort of veganism showing up in more spaces, we see more kind of junk food and more like burgers and more like replacement of perhaps the things that when we first went vegan, we were like, oh, we're going to miss X, Y, Z, and those have all like slowly been, or actually quite quickly been replaced, so that actually you don't want for anything. Like what do you see as like from a food blogging point of view has been like the most popular kind of dishes that you produce?
I think more widely, I would say like back maybe like 6-7 years ago, it would have been veganism was seen as like this wellness, raw, salady vibe, but now it's seen as like indulgent and like recipes that you didn't think you could eat vegan, but you can. So I think that I think like you hit the nail on the head by saying like it's that junk food element, which I think it's really grown, especially on Instagram. The vegan meat substitutes it can be a really divisive topic, especially on TikTok. I'm not a big TikToker, didn't do it sort of like ad hoc, but yeah, I had one video that was all about like I did like the vegan Cathedral City cheese came out, so I was just like trying that and made like a toasty, just like corn ham, vegan cheese toasty, just like a taste test. Got like 450,000 views. It's the worst video I've ever made, and it's just got so much talk. So many people going, yeah, I love this, I really want to try it. So many people going, I hate this, like that's not cheese. So I think, so I've kind of gone off track from your question there, but I think the biggest thing is where it used to be wellness and the raw diet that was really like inherently linked to veganism. It's now not that anymore, and there's a lot more junk food veganism, sort of vegan recipes out there.
I've asked this question to a lot of people and I've got loads of great answers and it always sort of shifts my thinking slightly. Like how positive do you feel about those kind of those substitutes? Do you think, and I'll present the sort of like the cases for and against like very briefly, but on one hand people will say, you know, well, first of all, and I agree with this point, you know, in the more general point, but veganism isn't shopping. So when we kind of hold it up as like, you know, this is great, this is a sign of progress, I think it kind of is, I suppose, if you're using it as a tool to have a conversation with someone who's not vegan. But if we're just celebrating Cadbury's have done something or Nestle have done something, well, they're also doing a lot of other things that we don't agree with, and so on. So there's on the one hand there's that, and there's also the element of actually these things present veganism differently from something positive and good for your wellness to something potentially unhealthy and bits and pieces like that. So is there a more of a dropout rate from vegans who start with junk food and et cetera, and then find it difficult to be as healthy as they'd expected, all those kind of things? On the other hand, amazing transition tools, you know, taking up more shelf space on the supermarket shelves, all the other kind of more positive arguments as well. Where do you kind of land on that? And it's fine if you land all over the place, because I certainly do.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. Definitely all over the place. As far as like the meat substitutes, the vegan cheeses, all of that sort of stuff, I do think that they are a really good tool for people to be able to try the recipes that they know and love and be, oh, I can have this as a vegan option. And it's sort of like a gateway into, like, you know, that world. But I think relying on them is potentially not the best. Like, I don't know. I'm not a dietitian. I can't say like this is healthy, this isn't healthy. You know, like a balanced diet is best for everyone. But I want the fruits and veggies and all of those sorts of things in my diet. But I also I like those sort of like those options that are available as a, you know, a treat on the weekend or something like that. So I think there's that one side of it is where it's like really cool, like gateway foods to get you to trying those recipes that you absolutely love, but, you know, a vegan or plant-based version. And I think that's like doing the world of good for the movement. Then I think also, I don't know, I see a lot of people saying, you know, like it's McDonald's or Burger King bringing out their vegan options or their plant-based options or whatever, you know, don't support them sort of thing. And I just, maybe because I'm interested in like capitalism and how that affects like the world and like, you know, how that sort of interplays with everything. And I think that there is, to those, you know, those big companies, their value is in the shareholder profit and like how their sales. So if we can show that there's a real need for these products, even if you're not eating them every day, I think like that talks to them, and those numbers speak to them. If they're like, oh, we've got all these people that want these vegan options now, let's do more. And then other companies are following. And I don't know, I might be looking at it through rose-tinted glasses, but in however many more years, maybe their model changes. Maybe they're 50% less animals that are on their menu. And because I don't think that we're ever going to see change from the world we're in now to tomorrow, we're going to wake up and all of a sudden it's a vegan world. It's just not going to happen. It's going to happen very, very slowly. And I like to think that we're on that journey now. Sometimes it feels like we're not, but I think those big brands jumping on board is a really good sign that the world is changing.
Yeah. In my more positive space at moments, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I like you, I go back and forth dependent. I just wonder whether like it's our job to promote them. I don't know. Like as sort of vegans who are already there, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know that we need to promote them, but just to have as like, you know, I think it normalizes the movement to people who are not vegan. I think like a big brand name, even like, didn't Tesco have like a vegan advert that was like promoting their vegan line maybe 6 months ago or something? Like,
yeah, they did.
Things like that. I think it really normalizes it. Like you know, you're in your friend group, you're not just the weird vegan anymore. You're like, oh yeah, loads of people are vegan now. Tesco's selling it. There's a McPlant. Like that's just normal. I know, with the rose tinted glasses, there's always going to be someone who's going, oh, it's, that's not going to last. It's a phase or whatever. Like, I don't know. I don't think it's a phase. I think it's happening. I just think it's really slow.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's when I see like vegan news outlets, I think that's the one with the sort of the paid post for XYZ like Burger King or something, and it's sort of hailed as progress, and I kind of think, is that progress? I don't know. I sort of I flip flop on it.
It is, yeah, it is, because say 20 years ago it wouldn't have been on the radar.
Yeah, true.
And I don't know. I always come back to they're big conglomerates that are making money. If they're seeing this is something to invest in, that's could be an indication of where the world's going.
Yeah, definitely. I hope so.
I hope so.
I just don't trust them.
No, I don't trust them either. We don't have to trust them.
No, that's true.
They are doing something in that area that they were not doing previously.
That is true. That is true. As long as it's less animals are being killed in that process. But that's where I sort of think, is it just that they're getting them? Like, I didn't go to McDonald's before particularly.
No, neither did I.
And so I sort of then think, well, me going there now just gives them some more money. It doesn't like reduce the suffering of an animal. Do you know what I mean? But then there may be some people who'd go there regularly and they're switching. So
yeah. You know what, actually, on that topic, I went to Cribs Causeway in Bristol last November, and they turned their Burger King in that mall completely vegan for the whole month.
Oh, okay.
And while we were in there, like, it was an interesting experience. There were positives and negatives, but while we were sat in there, like, we would never go to a Burger King to eat for a meal. Like, it was just the novelty that they were doing it.
Yeah.
And there must have been the majority of people that came in didn't know it was a vegan, Burger King for the month, and they were at the little machine choosing, and they were like, "Oh, it's vegan or it's veggie," like, and they're like, "Oh, we'll just get it anyway."
Right. Interesting.
Literally, there must have been like maybe 80% or so of the people that we saw just got the food anyway. So just like, that's actually really cool that they didn't just walk out and go to the next fast food restaurant that was in the, the food court. And two, that they did it. Like, I don't know, like I think there's something to that, but I think Burger King have said something like they're reducing their menu. I can't remember. I don't want to get it wrong for your podcast, but they're reducing
That's
by...
okay, I'll get it wrong all the time. So people are used to it by now.
They're reducing the meat on their menu by, like, I want to say it's 50%, because it was a figure that I was just like, I can't believe it, but they've said it. And I think it was by 2030, and it was about the meat on the menu. And so it's going to be, I'm going to get it wrong, and hopefully one of your audience members will be able to correct me, but I think it was something like 50% less meat on the menu by 2030. And I think that's actually progress. If that's what it was, something like that. It might not be the exact stats, but if it is something like that that's happening, then that, to me, that is progress.
Yeah, I mean, and if that's really interesting. Because like I said, whenever I ask this question, somebody gives me a slightly different angle to think on and mull over. So
it's a really interesting topic.
The Cribs Causeway example as well is fascinating to me. The kind of like, that people walked in and they didn't have another choice, so they just went, oh, okay, cool, and they just got on with it and had it. And that's really interesting. I don't know. It sort of flashed up in my mind because of your Ecotricity connection. What flashed up in my mind was Forest Green Rovers and going there. And I go there like once or twice a season. A, because I like football.
Brilliant.
B, because I like the whole ethos. And, it's the one football ground you can go to and not worry about what you're eating there. And
Absolutely.
Jade's also awesome, the head chef there.
She's so good.
She's the best, right? She's been on the show a few times and she's amazing. So, yeah, it reminded me of Forest Green Rovers. And I was once stood there next to some away supporters who I kind of overheard with the sort of, omnivorous jibes at the food and so on and so forth. But then I noticed, like, probably about 20 minutes later, they both came back with like a burger and chips. And so it did make me think, and they weren't disparaging of them either. They were just like, ate them and they're like, oh, it's pretty good actually. So and it did make me think, Okay, that's interesting. Like it's a bit like your kind of your Burger King Cribs Causeway example. Like, yeah, I wonder if that's the sort of the positive spin on it. That actually, if companies do some of that, it may sort of Trojan horse its way into kind of people's psyche, and then hopefully they then, I don't know, an Instagram search later and they're cooking your curried pasta, for example.
Exactly.
Or something like that. You know, like I'd hope that's the case. And on more optimistic moments, and you've given me one today, that's kind of where we go. I hope that's the case. My less optimistic moments, I'm like, are they just trying to get the vegan to not ruin the non-vegan, or the non-vegans order? You know, when you're in the group with the non-vegans, and you usually dictate where everybody goes because you're the problem, quote unquote. You're the pain. So everybody says, "Oh, where do you need to go?" and if you say, Burger King or whatever is fine, then they still get to sell all the regular Whoppers and all the rest of it. So that's my negative take. My positive take, I'm kind of with you. And actually, the kind of if the 50% thing's right, and the whole like turning whole restaurants vegan, that's really interesting to me.
Yeah, they did it in Trafalgar Square as well. They're like the flagship store in London.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. Let's get back to the blog briefly in terms of the future of it. Like, where do you see it going? What's the plans for it? Like, I could certainly see like a cookbook or like longer form YouTube videos or all kinds of different things. What's the plans?
Yeah, there's loads of directions it can go in, I suppose. I really want to do a cookbook. I really would like to do a cookbook at some point. Like, it has not... Yeah, we just haven't kind of like got into that space yet, but that would be super cool to just have something physical to hold. It's got all of our recipes in it. Just to kind of grow the community. I really want to just grow the community. Maybe I want to offer some sort of like ebooks as well. We've got a couple of ebooks. We've got a Christmas one. We've got a Thai one, but I want to do something that's more around... that will be more helpful to people when they're like, right, I'm going to try going vegan. What do I do? Well, if I can provide a meal plan that also has like a shopping list and the recipes all in sort of like one handy download or whatever, that might be really helpful. So I would like to go down that route as well. That's something that's on my radar for the next couple of months. Yeah, like just to continue growing, continue publishing, and hopefully get to that cookbook in my hands. But yeah, I love the food. I love the food photography element of it. So I would it's an absolute dream to shoot a cookbook for me.
Well, the content's amazing. I love the Insta. It's awesome, and the blog on the online is also awesome. Like, there's so many amazing ideas in there, and even as someone who's been vegan for a few years, there's loads of things in there that I'm like, right, I need to try that now. So I thank you both for it. It's awesome. Where would folks go about finding Vegan Punks?
That is just at veganpunks.com. You'll be able to find all of our recipes there. And our Instagram is vegan_punks. And that's where all of our videos are.
Amazing. Jess, thanks so much for your time. It's been awesome chatting with you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me on, Jim.